The morning sun filtered gently through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the room where I sat, tying my tie for what felt like the most important day of my life. My daughter, Lily, my little girl who used to hide behind my legs when the world seemed too loud, was about to marry the man she loved. Or so I thought. I had imagined this day 100 times, walking her down the aisle, smiling at the happy faces of family and friends, watching her glow in her wedding dress, and feeling that quiet, satisfying pride of a father who had done everything right. My hands shook slightly, not with nerves, but with anticipation. The house buzzed with energy. My wife fussed over the final touches of her hair. Lily laughed with her bridesmaids, radiating joy that made my chest tighten. I took a deep breath, adjusting my jacket, and told myself that today nothing could go wrong. Nothing, I thought. The ceremony began in a sun-drenched garden, adorned with flowers in every shade of white and pink, their fragrance mingling with the fresh spring air. Guests smiled and whispered, glasses of champagne catching the light. Lily looked breathtaking, her eyes shining as she approached me, her hand warm in mine. I felt a surge of love so strong it almost knocked the wind out of me. And then, just as I stepped forward to take my place beside her, it happened. Her fiancé, Thomas, came toward me with a wide, artificial grin. "Here, Dad," he said, with that insincere charm I had begun to sense in him months ago. "Let me pull out your chair." At first I thought nothing of it, assuming he meant well. But the moment I reached for it, the seat slipped from under me. No, not slipped. He had intentionally pulled it away. I felt the world tilt, my legs folding beneath me, and then the hard, humiliating slap of the floor against my knees. "Your place is on the floor," he shouted, his voice loud enough for the whole garden to hear. The laughter erupted immediately, sharp and cruel, slicing through the joyful air. I froze, the sting of both the fall and the words burning into my pride. Faces turned toward me, smiles and laughter, masking the shock and confusion in the room. Guests nudged each other, whispering and pointing. Lily's eyes widened, and I saw the flicker of embarrassment and disbelief. Her hand flew to her mouth, as if trying to stop the laughter that echoed like a harsh bell in my ears. And then, as if fate itself had decided to add insult to injury, Thomas's father, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and a commanding presence, leaned forward and peered at me. His brows furrowed, and for a heartbeat the laughter seemed to die down. "Sir, is that you?" he asked, his voice sharp, tinged with incredulity. I looked up, my face burning, and met his gaze. The shock in his eyes mirrored my own humiliation. I realized then that I wasn't just a guest or a father. I had become a spectacle. The floor beneath me wasn't just a physical plane. It was a symbolic place where my dignity had been stripped away. The rest of the ceremony blurred. Words floated in and out of my consciousness, but all I could focus on was the searing humiliation, the sting of laughter from people I barely knew, and the betrayal that sat heavy in my chest. The man who had promised to love my daughter, who had vowed to protect and cherish her, had instead chosen this moment to humiliate me, to assert dominance in the most cruel and calculated way. When the ceremony ended and people began mingling, I remained on the sidelines, nursing my bruised pride and my aching knees. I watched Thomas laugh easily with the other guests, oblivious or indifferent to the destruction he had caused. My daughter drifted toward me, her eyes wide and anxious. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't worry about it, Lily," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes, but inside a fire had ignited, a quiet, simmering rage. Humiliation, yes, but also determination. I knew then that this story would not end on the floor. That night, long after the music faded and the guests had gone home, I sat alone in the dark living room. The house was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar, too quiet for a day that was supposed to be filled with joy. My knees still ached, but the pain was nothing compared to the heaviness in my chest. I replayed the moment again and again. The chair, the laughter, the words. Asterisk, your place is on the floor. Asterisk, I had endured many things in my life. Long nights working 2 jobs, missed meals so my daughter could eat, silent sacrifices no one ever noticed. But never had I been publicly stripped of my dignity. Not like that. Not by a man who was now part of my family. I wasn't angry in the way people expect. I didn't shout. I didn't throw things. My anger settled into something colder, quieter, something that burned slowly, patiently. Hidden flames. In the bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection. Wrinkles lined my face, my hair streaked with gray. To Thomas, I was probably nothing more than an aging man with worn shoes and a modest suit, someone easy to mock. Someone who looked like he belonged on the floor. He had no idea who I was. Years ago, before life stripped me down and reshaped me into a simpler man, I had built things from nothing. I had learned how people thought, how pride blinded them, how arrogance always created its own downfall. I had learned that the most powerful revenge wasn't loud. It was asterisk, inevitable asterisk, and Thomas was arrogant. Over the following weeks, I said nothing. I smiled when I had to. I attended family dinners, listened to Thomas boast about his work, his connections, his bright future. He loved to talk. Men like him always do. They mistake silence for weakness and humility for ignorance. And I listened. I learned that his success was fragile, built on borrowed credibility, and carefully maintained appearances. I learned he depended heavily on his father's reputation and certain business partnerships that thrived on asterisk, respect asterisk, and asterisk image asterisk. I learned that behind his confidence was a desperate need for validation. Most importantly, I learned that he believed I was beneath him. That belief was my greatest advantage. Late at night, I began reconnecting with people from my past. Old colleagues, former associates, men who owed me favors I never collected. I didn't tell them my story. I didn't need sympathy. I only asked questions, quiet ones, harmless ones. Do you know this company? Have you worked with this man? What's your impression of him? The answers came slowly, then all at once. And with each answer, the plan formed not as revenge fueled by hatred, but as a lesson carved in humility. I wasn't going to humiliate Thomas the way he humiliated me. That would be easy and meaningless. I was going to let him humiliate himself. One evening, Lily visited me alone. She looked tired. Marriage had already begun weighing on her in ways she didn't yet understand. "Dad," she said softly, sitting beside me, "Thomas said you've been distant." I looked at her, the same little girl who once cried when she scraped her knee, who trusted me to make the world safe again. My heart tightened. "I'm fine," I said gently, "just thinking." She hesitated. "He can be blunt sometimes, but he didn't mean—" "I know." I interrupted, placing my hand over hers. "And this has nothing to do with you, I promise." That promise became my compass. Everything I did next would be careful. Precise, clean. I wasn't seeking to destroy a marriage. I was seeking to protect my daughter from a man who believed cruelty was strength. The opportunity revealed itself sooner than I expected. An upcoming charity gala, influential guests. Business leaders, the kind of place where reputations were currency and manners were everything. Thomas was eager to attend, eager to be seen, eager to impress. And this time I would be there too. I ironed my old suit, the same one he thought made me small. I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled, not with anger, but with certainty. The floor he pushed me onto had become my foundation, and from it I would rise. The charity gala was everything Thomas dreamed it would be. Glittering chandeliers, polished marble floors, and a crowd that thrived on influence, reputation, and appearances. He moved through it with practiced charm, shaking hands, exchanging smiles, making sure everyone noticed him. His every word dripped with confidence, arrogance neatly wrapped in a suit that cost more than my house. I watched from across the room, calm, composed, a quiet shadow in the corner. No one would have guessed the fire that simmered beneath my measured demeanor. The guests saw only a dignified man, father of the bride, quietly observing the evening's social dance. But I knew exactly which strings to pull. Thomas was the first to reveal himself. He approached a group of influential businessmen, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, projecting success that was far thinner than it appeared. I followed him quietly, listening, waiting. I had discovered something vital in the weeks before the gala. Thomas's impressive portfolio depended on a fragile web of connections. A single misstep, an unverified claim, a mismanaged account, a slip in etiquette, could unravel his carefully constructed image. All I had to do was create the right circumstances. It began subtly. At first, I whispered casual questions to people around him, industry insiders, people who knew the truth. Nothing accusatory, nothing dramatic. Just pointed questions, phrased like innocent curiosity. Have you ever worked with Thomas? Oh, how long did that last? And the results? Did they meet expectations? Eyes flicked, nods, hesitant smiles, subtle glances. Nothing public yet. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Thomas, naturally, noticed the shifts. He laughed a little too loudly at my presence, sneered at the whispers he thought were harmless. Pride, he thought, would shield him. Pride, however, is fragile when exposed to truth. The turning point came during a toast. As the room gathered to honor prominent members of the community, Thomas volunteered to give a speech. He strode to the podium, radiating self-assurance. Guests leaned forward, curious, admiring the confidence of the young man who dared to shine so brightly. I had prepared this moment carefully. A former colleague, someone whose opinion Thomas had ignored for years, casually mentioned a recent mishap in the company portfolio. Speaking directly to another influential guest. Nothing dramatic, just a statement of fact. The effect was immediate. A ripple of recognition passed through the room. Conversations faltered. Eyes shifted. The thin veneer of Thomas's invincibility cracked. He noticed it. His confident smile flickered. His voice trembled as he tried to continue, jokes landing awkwardly. He faltered on numbers he had rehearsed, mispronounced names, his once commanding presence now wavering. I stayed in the shadows, observing quietly. The room that had once celebrated him now questioned him. My chest swelled not with cruelty, but with justice, measured and precise. And then, almost imperceptibly, I allowed myself a small, subtle victory. A polite nod toward the room, my gaze meeting the eyes of those who mattered most. No words, no spectacle. Just a quiet, undeniable assertion of dignity. By the time the evening ended, Thomas was exhausted, humiliated without a single raised finger from me. The crowd whispered. Connections he had counted on wavered. Reputation, once a fortress, had become a fragile house of cards. Outside, in the cool night air, Lily approached me. Her eyes were wide, searching. Dad, you didn't. She trailed off, not quite knowing how to phrase what she felt. I didn't need to, I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Sometimes the most powerful lessons don't need loud words. They need truth. She nodded, relief washing over her features. For the first time since the wedding, I saw genuine pride in her eyes, not just for her day, but for the quiet strength of the man she had always trusted. As we walked away from the gala, I realized something profound. Revenge, when executed with grace, does not degrade you. It elevates you. And Thomas, arrogant, brash, careless, had learned a lesson he would carry with him for a long time. The flames of humiliation he had ignited in me had not consumed me. They had forged me into something steadier, stronger, sharper. And the best part, the victory was not mine alone. My daughter's honor had been protected, my family's dignity preserved. And for once, I felt the intoxicating, quiet satisfaction of justice served not with cruelty, but with brilliance. The days after the gala were quiet, almost serene. The storm of humiliation that had once threatened to drown me had settled into a calm, warm certainty. I could finally breathe. The subtle justice I had orchestrated had run its course, and Thomas's arrogance had begun to waver. He was careful now, measured, aware that pride without humility carried consequences. Yet, more than the external victory, it was the internal peace that mattered most. I had reclaimed my dignity not through anger, but through patience, wit, and quiet strength. And I had preserved what mattered most, my daughter's happiness and the respect of everyone I held dear. One afternoon, Lily came to visit me. She held a small envelope, her eyes glistening as if she were trying to hold back tears. "Dad, I wanted to give you this," she said, handing me the envelope. I opened it carefully. Inside were letters from friends, colleagues, and even some guests from the gala. They spoke of respect, admiration, and quiet acknowledgment of the grace I had displayed. There were notes about Thomas, 2 observations that made it clear he had finally understood the consequences of his arrogance. Lily smiled, hesitating. "I was so scared, Dad. I thought after what happened at the wedding, maybe you'd hate him forever. But I can see you're not angry like before. You're stronger." I took her hand, holding it gently. "Sweetheart, anger is easy. Strength is knowing when to act and when to wait. Revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about restoring balance, and tonight, I think that balance is ours." We sat together, in silence for a while, the sun casting golden light across the room. I reflected on the journey, the humiliation, the quiet planning, the elegant triumph, and realized that the most important part wasn't the revenge itself. It was the love that had guided it, the care with which I protected her, the dignity I refused to surrender. Weeks passed and the family gathered again, not for a wedding, but for simple dinners, quiet conversations, and shared laughter. Thomas was there, tempered now by the lesson he had learned, his behavior cautious but sincere. I observed him carefully, measuring his words, weighing his actions. I did not need to test him further. The gentle humility he now displayed spoke for itself. One evening, Lily and I walked through the garden, the same place where months ago the humiliation had unfolded. She slipped her hand into mine, her warmth grounding me in ways I had forgotten I needed. "Dad, thank you," she whispered. "For what?" I asked. "For protecting me, and for teaching him, and for showing me that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet." I smiled, feeling the weight of the journey lift from my shoulders. "You've grown so much, Lily, but you've always been strong. I only helped remind someone else of that." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I realized that life, like this sunset, was a series of moments, some painful, some joyous, but each one an opportunity to rise, to reclaim dignity, and to nurture love. Thomas's presence no longer filled me with anger. He was a reminder that arrogance carries its own burden, and that wisdom, patience, and grace can turn even the deepest humiliation into triumph. As we stepped inside, the house filled with laughter and warmth, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The story that had begun with pain had ended with love, respect, and redemption. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the deep, unshakable peace that comes from knowing justice has been served, not in vengeance, but in wisdom. I looked at my daughter, and I knew, no matter what challenges life might bring, we would face them together. With strength, with dignity, and with hearts full of love. The floor that had once held me down had become the foundation upon which I rose, not just victorious, but renewed. And for that, I was eternally grateful.